special thank you to the Nicker players last night. I don't know if all of you went, but it was incredible. Yeah, encore. Every year I always think, gosh, is it going to get better? And it does. So thank you guys for all your efforts. It was incredible. I also wanted to thank our sponsors. They're not showing up right now. We'll show them a little bit later. But thank you to all the sponsors. We really appreciate your support. And again, we wouldn't be able to do this without you. If you're going on Explore this afternoon, meet in the lobby, and the buses will pick you up there. I'll give you one last reminder before, or at the very end as well. And then also, I wanted to introduce the CRRA board. We had our elections with the board positions the other night, and so I'll go ahead and announce who they are, and if you can, the board members just stand up, that would be great. And then go ahead and hold applause at the very end. So in the Northern District, we have Rob Hilton with the HFH Consultants, and he is our treasurer for the next year. Leslie Lukash L2 Environmental, who is our RONA, NRC, ROC, and KAB liaison. Peter Sloat, the City of Oakland, he is the vice president. Central District, Monica Devincenzi with Rethink Waste, and she's our Development and Communications chair. Bob Nelson, City of Santa Cruz, and he's actually not here because he's in France. He's our TC liaison. Myself with Cascadia Consulting Group, and I'll be president for the next year. And then in the Southern District, we have Rick Anthony with Richard Anthony and Associates. He's our international liaison. And then Lynn France with the City of Chula Vista. And then Colleen Foster with the City of Oceanside. She will be our secretary for this next year. And then, of course, we have our advisors as well. Susan Collins with Container Recycling Institute. John Davis with Mojave Desert and Mountain Recycling Authority. Bob Hollis with the Mobius Network. David Kruger with the City of San Ramon. And Julie Mura with PSSI Stanford Recycling. And then our staff, I also want to thank Patty Morgan and Judy Gregory. So thank you all very much. All right, so before I get started on the bio for our keynote, I just wanted to mention, Wednesdays are always a little bit of a struggle because of the eating and the food and all of that. People want to socialize before we go. But if we could try to just keep it a little hush, we'll get through the program quicker, and then you can talk afterwards. So thank you. All right, so Eric Corey Freed is founding principal of Organic Architect, an architecture and consulting firm in California with over 20 years of experience in green building. Eric co-developed the Sustainable Design programs at the Academy of Art University and University of California, Berkeley Extension, and currently teaches at Boston Architectural College. He is a founding board member and current chair of the Coachella Valley branch of the U.S. Green Building Council and sits on the Sustainability Commission for the City of Palm Desert. Described as one of the real brains of his generation at age 25. Today, Eric continues the tradition of organic architecture, first developed by Frank Lloyd Wright. And the other interesting thing is that actually Eric, he got a little training gig in Boston, and so he actually flew in this morning and is flying back tonight to Boston. So thank you so much. Please help me welcome Eric.
Oh my gosh. I have no idea what time it is, what state I'm in. No idea what, I apologize, I don't know what to say. Hi everybody, how are you? Welcome. I don't know what you did to these people sitting here, but they're clearly, they're getting scared off, they're not coming. As you heard by that painfully long introduction, I'm an architect, and all the buildings I work on are green. We don't have some green buildings and some non-green buildings because I never figured out what to call the other ones, right? Are those the toxic buildings? So I just force it on all the clients equally, and it's worked out pretty well so far. First, I want to start by apologizing to you for the entire environmental movement. Because 30 years ago, someone had the idea that we were going to get everybody to agree. Like, we're going to get everybody to want to recycle and want to use non-toxic. Like, that was the plan, and that was a dumb plan. I apologize. That was stupid. So my philosophy now is just, force it on. Just shove it down their throats and force it on. It's so much easier. Because you have to remember something. You're the winners here. You're the victors. You have the winning proposition. Don't be apologetic. For 30 years, oh please, is it okay if we recycle? Is it okay if we don't put cancer-causing chemicals in the building? Is that okay? Are you nuts? A green building is a better building. A green building generates its own energy, cleans its own water, regenerates its own waste. What are you apologizing for? Ridiculous, just force it on them. So much easier. Trust me, you don't need to do that. You don't need up my time. They give me a limited amount of time. So I want to start with one of my favorite poems by the poet W.H. Auden. And in it he says, "We are all here on earth to help others. What the others are here for, no idea." And that's kind of what it's like to be an environmentalist. Because all of you are literally saving the world. All of you. And yet, you probably, like me, get a call every week from your mother saying, "Are you still doing that recycling thing?" But they don't get it. They just don't get it. And it's kind of a weird time to be alive. So I get to speak all over the country. I'm happy to be in my home in California, obviously. But I get to speak all over the country. And so this is my daughter. Don't make any noise. It's annoying. But this is my daughter. And she's 5. And I took her to see this net zero project that we did. And it was a cool project because the solar panels were on the ground. It was like an unusual project. So we got to climb on them and stuff. And she said, Daddy, what do these do? And I said, oh honey, those make energy from the sun, clean energy from the sun. There's no pollution. It is free. And she said, Daddy, why don't all buildings do this? And I leaned down and I looked in her cute little face. And I said, honey, that's because most people are douchebags. What am I going to say to her? I can't explain it. Why aren't they all? I don't know. And that's kind of the problem. I deal with this kind of insanity all the time. That's my life, just dealing with like crazy things. I spoke in Wichita, which is in Kansas. If you don't know, it's in Kansas. I thought, well, there's no way I'm going to go all the way to Wichita and not talk to them about their largest employer, the Koch brothers. I wanted them to know about Koch Industries. And for those of you who don't know, Koch is an oil and gas company, $100 million a year. And Charles Koch likes to say that we're the largest company nobody's ever heard of before. He kind of likes it, nobody knows who he is. And this company takes a fraction of their profits, and they are the single largest source for climate denial. They're running the whole climate denial machine. And just in the last few years, they spent $73 million funding groups to spread that climate change doesn't exist. And they're excellent at it, by the way. They're really competitive. $73 million will buy you a lot of talented people. And they don't even need to convince you. All they need to do is just keep planting that seed of doubt. And it works. It works. And using these types of collusive practices, they become tied for the 9th richest Americans. Yet most people have never heard of these people before. And they're dictating our energy policy. They take the $73 million, they funnel it in all these little groups, these fake grassroots organizations. They pay people to stand with signs. They give people t-shirts to wear. They don't even know what they're saying. And they build these fake websites, and it's very effective. And that's kind of the trouble. How do we, David and Goliath situation, how do we compete against that? And so they recorded my talk, and then they broadcast it on Wichita television. And I know they broadcast it on Wichita television because I started getting these wonderful emails from people saying, I didn't get to see you when you were in town, but I got to watch it on TV, and you have such great hair, and all the things I'm used to hearing. And I thought, well, that's nice. And then a few weeks later, I got a call from the woman that organized it, and she said, we had to take your talk down. And I said, why? She said, well, someone complained about what you said about the Koch brothers. I said, so? She said, well, we don't like when people complain, so we took it down. And I said, why didn't you just fact check what I said? I listed all the sources, just fact check it. She said, we did. Everything you said was true, but we took it down anyway. And I said, okay, well, that was like 2 minutes of a 1-hour talk. Why don't you just edit it and then put up the other 58? And she said, well, we want to. We just don't have the budget for that right now. So that's just kind of insanity and stupidity that we all have to deal with on a regular basis. So it's kind of annoying. It's kind of like this.
I don't like you jerk off names. I don't like you jerk off face. I don't like you jerk off behavior. And I don't like you jerk off. Do I make myself clear?
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
That's what it's like when I go to these places. I mean, here in California, it's easy. But I go to like Lincoln, Nebraska, and Birmingham, Alabama, like places like that. And so people don't want to hear the If I told you the truth, you'd be like rocking in the fetal position in the hotel room right now. So all I got for you is bad news. It's just bad news. I'm sorry about that. So what I do is this is what I do. Like most of my time is spent going around the country talking to people, and every year I make a new talk from scratch. So in 2009, I talked about Hurricane Katrina and how we toxified all New Orleans. In 2010, I talked about the lost city of Detroit and how we can rebuild it with an aggressive recycling program in urban agriculture. And in 2011, I talked about how we designed everything around the car and how silly and short-sighted that was. And we need to change it. And all of last year and all of this year, I've been talking about all the dumb things that we do in the name of progress. And I decided that because we do all these dumb things, really, I coined a term to describe what we are, and really that term is dodo sapiens. That's what we are. We're just dodo sapiens. And so what I want to share with you today is a little bit of, I put it together special for you, but together, this is really the sequel to that, so it's Attack of the Dodo Sapiens. It's the sequel. There was so much dumb stuff that we do, it's just a lot of material. And I don't know if I'm going to call it Attack of the Dodo Sapiens or Dodo Sapiens 2 Electric Boogaloo. I'm not quite sure yet. Can't decide. By the way, just as a side note, Electric Boogaloo, great movie if you want to see it. It doesn't have to do with recycling or anything, but it's just a good movie, just in general. And just direction and, filming and everything. Anyway, where was I? Oh, so the reason I call it Dodo Sapiens is because we just do these dumb things. We just don't pay attention to our built environment. We forget that we just forget that design has, implications between things. Things on autopilot, like put a trash bag in another bag, and we don't think about it. So and as a result, we just have these excessively inefficient systems that just nobody stops to question it. And because of that, we're left with all this residue in the environment that just is ugly and annoying, and it pisses people off. It just makes people mad. Why would you have that? And it doesn't really fix anything. It's just bothersome. And it's telling things that people should already know, like not to do. You really need a sign to tell you that? And oftentimes it's just about liability and pointing blame, really, than actually solving any problems. And sometimes we're trying to fix things that, just make people angrier, that works against you. Or even trying to fix things that can't be fixed with a sign, things that maybe need a little more effort than that. And it's, it's not like they work. I mean, they never work. So why do we do it? So we just, as a speed, we just don't make connections anymore between things. We just forget that we're going to have a stream of hot liquid. We probably should keep it with electricity. That might be a good idea. And what I do is I try to get people to make connections. I try to show them connections. So for example, I was driving down the freeway and I saw this bumper sticker. And, it's not my type of humor. I'm much more highbrow than this, but, definitely like it. So, it's cute. It's cute. But I saw this, and then the very next car answered the question for me. And that's what we need to do. We need to make connections between the built environment. Because in the evolutionary scale of things, we've got Homo sapien, and then boom, Dodo sapien right after that. And we have this wonderful, rich history, this wonderful culture of art and science and literature and philosophy and music. And somewhere along the way, we just kind of it kind of works like this.
Process which had once favored the noblest traits of man now began to favor different traits. Most science fiction of the day predicted a future that was more civilized and more intelligent. But as time went on, things seemed to be heading in the opposite direction.
So I've become a bit of a cultural anthropologist. I study people. I sit in cafes and I make notes about your behavior because it's weird to me, man. The things that we do that nobody questions anymore, and we probably should. There's probably better ways to handle this. And so, we toxified the whole planet, just destroyed everything, and we didn't even have any fun doing it. You know what I mean? Like, if you're gonna have a party, at least have a little bit of fun, and we didn't. And so the warning signs are just coming louder and louder, closer and closer together, and we're just ignoring them. We're just walking. We don't want to hear it's depressing. I don't want to hear it. I need to feel good all the time, like all that stuff. It's, and we need to pay attention to this. So that's why am I asking permission? Please, is it okay if I put recycled materials in your building? Is that all right? Like, why am I apologizing? So just force it on. It's so much easier. So every project we do has no added formaldehyde. Automatically, I don't ask. I you has 0 VOC paints. Why would I ask? I feel like an idiot. Like, why would I ask? And knowing what we all know about our resources, why would we rip out virgin materials anyway, just because we just depleted everything? In the 1920s, when oil was just bubbling out of the ground everywhere, I get it. It made sense to make everything, our entire chemistry out of oil. But now we're still doing it, and it's not cheap anymore. It's certainly not abundant. We've just toxified everything. And as a result, kids suffer the most because their little systems can't handle it. So among kids, we now have autism rates of 1 in 88, and among males, for some reason it's higher, it's 1 in 54. Excuse me, 1 in 20 have seizures, and they don't really quite know why. And 1 in 12 have food allergies. No, I'm not that old. I mean, I'm old, but I'm not that old. But when I was a kid, nobody had food allergies. I mean, one kid at camp, when he drank milk, he'd fart and he'd beat him up. But that would be it. Now, like, every kid has food allergies. I went to my daughter's school. I forgot I had a peanut granola bar in my pocket. And I went to pick her up at school, and they tackled me to the ground like a criminal. It's kind of nuts. 1 in 10 kids have ADHD. 1 in 9 have asthma, which is directly related to the indoor environment toxins. And 1 in 6 are learning disability. And if you really look at how we feed them, 1 in 3 are overweight. And if you add up all of this together, essentially half our kids are either sick or fat. There's one guy left. Sicko. But just look at what nature does automatically. Nature doesn't have waste. Imagine how nature just processes things effortlessly. Sequestering carbon, fixing nitrogen, filtering soil, absorbing waste and creating it for food for everybody else. And what we do with our buildings is it's laughable, because we just barely scratch the surface of that. So we've got a really long way to go. It's really an exciting time to be alive. Because imagine what's technically possible. Instead of looking at a carpet, and when a child crawls across the carpet, they're fed Alzheimer's into their skin. Imagine we thought of material as a food nutrient. And when they crawled across the carpet, their little pudgy hands and knees would absorb vitamins. That's actually possible. And imagine if we had phase change materials, materials that would change color based on our mood, or based on our whim, or based on our season. Outside the building, we can do this for thermal reasons, right? We can have it go the same way you change your clothes between summer and winter. We can have it go light to dark to light again. And then imagine if we took some rapidly renewable materials like bamboo. Bamboo, some species goes 3 feet a day. And if you stroke it, it grows even faster. If you look at plants closely and pay attention to them, it almost looks like they're alive. Because they're alive. They're plants, they're alive. There's a trick. You failed. There's a trick question. They're alive. They're living, breathing things. They respond to their environment. They call it the secret life of plants. And we're just now starting to scratch the surface of it. It's called thermotropism. We're just now starting to scratch the surface of what we can do with our materials that respond to their environment. Imagine how much fun we could have with a thermotropic building. A building that moves with, imagine that was just a blast, right? We're now experimenting with things like self-healing materials that break and they heal the way that your skin does. And if you looked at it playing with concrete, that if you bend it, it cracks and fills in, it heals itself. And we're just now starting to scratch the surface of it. I've always loved bananas. I mean, I like to eat bananas, but I mean, just the design of bananas, it's just brilliant. And to me, bananas are the ultimate form of packaging. Because when you're done with it, it actually can feed the soil. And that's what we need to do. We need to redesign the stuff that we're throwing away. It wasn't designed to be recycled in the first place. So this is from 1962. Alfred Heineken was on a beach and one of his beer bottles washed ashore. And he thought, well, there's got to be a better way to design the bottle. So he changed the design to this. It's called the Wobo. And the idea was after you're done, get your buzz on, you take the bottles and you stack them up and you make a wall. And you can fill them with air or sand or water and produce the appropriate wall. And it never really went anywhere, but that's what we need to do. We need to just redesign everything. So I think about ways we could redesign things. Couldn't we take empty paint cans and just tweak the design a little bit so they can become lighting fixtures? Couldn't we take caulking tubes and just tweak the design a little bit so those could become plumbing if we need to for waste? And couldn't we take carpet backing and tweak the design a little bit so whatever you got left over you could just throw in the attic or throw on the wall and use it as insulation? All of that's easy. It's all possible. It just takes the will to do it. And anything else that isn't really reusable, we would design it to be biodegradable. So that way you produce compost, you grow food on the site, you solve a lot of other problems. There's a group, an outfit in Troy, New York, outside of Rensselaer, and they've invented this. This is called Ecovative, and it's mycelium, it's mushrooms. And they've made a new packaging for mushrooms. They're literally growing packaging. And you can eat it. I mean, it tastes terrible, but you can eat it. I've tried it, Bob. And that's the future of packaging. We're not just going to try to recycle everything, we're going to try to redesign everything. Now, the fundamental issue that's blocking us is really what I call the that people don't feel shame anymore. Now my dog's brain is this big, but if it does something bad, it feels shame. Like the dog is smart enough to do that, but people aren't, because you've all seen reality television, right? And so what we need to do is we need to bring back a little shame, a little. So this is the old executive office building in Washington, D.C. This is now the Vice President's office, by the way. And at the time it was built, Mark Twain called it the ugliest building in America. And by today's standards, of course, it's gorgeous. But back then it was considered, garish, really. And it was designed by this man, Alfred Mullet. He was the architect. And you all know Mullet from his haircuts, right? And Mullet was so depressed at the criticism he received over his building that he killed himself. And there's a few architects I wish would copy his example, if you know what I mean. Not all, just a few that would maybe follow his example and because we're just building these utterly awful, toxic buildings that are wasteful. And we can do better. We can do a lot better. We can do better than this. We can do much better, really, based on just what we know. That, by the way, that joke should have gotten a much bigger laugh. I think you guys are way too sensitive or something. All right. So I've discovered there's really only 7 motivations that get people to do anything. This is human behavior, right? The first 4, fear, impulse, jealousy, and shame, are kind of negative. But the last 3, passion, pride, and profit, that's what we need to do with green buildings. We need to infuse passion, pride, and profit in everything we do. We need to show them that they can be passionate about recycling. We need to show them they can take pride in the numbers of how getting to zero waste, and we show them they can make money at the same time. That's what we need to do. That's what we failed to do over the last 30 years, because we were saying, please do this, and we shouldn't. We should be focusing on these 3 things. And if we do this with green buildings, we can transform them, because that's what we do. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a landscape architect, and he said, we're change agents. People come to us when they want to make a change, because we take things like this and turn it into things like this. That's what we're good at. And that's what we need to do with green building. We need to make people realize that they need to change how they look at waste. We need to change how they look at recycling. And make passion, pride, and profit the center, really platform piece of how we do it. Because we're on this path towards inevitable destruction. And we've been building the same way for 200 years. And, if you're headed off a cliff, it doesn't help to slow down. It really doesn't. And doing it in a Prius doesn't really help much either. I mean, you look good doing it, but still, it doesn't solve the problem. If you're headed off a cliff, you got to turn the wheel. You got to go a different way. Frankly, what we need is just a whole new direction. What we need, frankly, is a revolution. How we look at buildings, how we process waste, how we look at materials. That's what's needed. Because the warning signs are coming louder and louder, closer and closer together every day. And this was not designed to be subtle. I mean, they don't pick right to be subtle. This is as in your... there's no other way to say this more clearly than, hey, stupid, look over here, pay attention, this is important. And that's what we need to do. So I don't engage with climate deniers anymore. I don't argue with them. I go all over the country. I used to love to just argue with climate denier people until they cry. I used to love it. It was my hobby. And now I don't do it anymore. I would sooner argue with them than I would with somebody about gravity. There's just no point. Just knowing what we know and knowing the cost of inaction is just too great and too expensive. Why bother? In 1970, 1972, we hit a point in this country called peak oil. Meaning that no matter how hard we try, we get harder and harder to pull oil out of the ground. That's why we started importing. In 2003, we hit peak oil globally. And now we've hit a point that I call peak nature. That our resources are packed so thin that really, as we're racing towards 9 billion people on the planet, we really can't handle it anymore. So we need to work on regeneration. We need to work on recycling. We need to work on improving how we look at waste and how we look at it. Every industry, every decade has its own industry. In the 1930s, it was oil. In the 40s, it was steel. In the 50s, it was plastic. And in the 60s, it was chemicals. And you all saw The Graduate, so you know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. And then in the 70s and 80s, it was computers. In the 90s, it was the banking with the scandals, the SNL scandals. And the last decade, it's been about security. But the next few decades really need to be about regeneration, about undoing the damage we've done, about fixing the past. That's the next big thing. That's what we need to focus on. So I don't argue with these climate deniers. It's a waste of our time to do it. Let's just all agree that this is real and happening. We need to address it now. So there's several types of dodo sapiens that I've identified. And I'm not going to go through all these because I don't want to. But I'm going to go through a few. The first one is the skeptical dodo sapien. And this one's the most prevalent, really. And I'll be speaking like in Lincoln, Nebraska or something, and I'll see these guys come up to me afterwards. And they have like a smirk on their face, so I know it's coming. And they always have one little bit of information. They're armed with that, and I'm just ready to decimate them because I'm used to it. That's what I do for a living. And So, for instance, one of the famous things that they'll say is that the debate is still on about climate change. Scientists are still debating it. Let me show you what debate looks like. 14,000 peer-reviewed articles, a whopping 24 that were rejected. This is as much consensus as you're going to get with anything, really. So in dealing with these skeptics, I've discovered they have certain arguments that they like to use, and I want to share them with you so you can be prepared to argue with them, really. The first is the ad hominem argument. This is where they attack you instead of the point you're trying to make, right? So for instance, a typical thing was, oh, you don't care about the planet, you drive a car, or you wear clothes, or live indoors, or like whatever they're pointing. Don't fall for it. Stay focused on the argument. The next is the loaded question. And in comedy, the famous loaded question is, hey, how long have you been beating your wife? Right? That's the famous loaded question in comedy. But in climate change, it's the same thing. How long have you been a communist? Like, people ask me that. And I just say, all my life. That's what I always say. Then there's the all or nothing argument. This is where if you say you believe in one thing, therefore you reject all else. And it's just silly. Nobody thinks that way. Like if you say, I support gay marriage, they say, well, then you think only gay people can get married. No, I think everybody should be able to get. I think gay people have the right to be as miserable as everybody else. Then there's the guilt by association argument. This is where they say, that Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber? He believed in climate change. And if you think I'm making this up, in Mississippi they printed billboards and hung them up around town. I'm not making this up. And then my absolute favorite one is the false cause argument. And someone said this to me. In real life, they said this to me. They said, we never had climate change before women got the vote. Yeah. It's the women. And their uteruses. I don't know what they're... Carbon-emitting uteruses. The trouble is that there's this 24-hour disinformation machine that really is really just filling their heads with these little bits that are not very good. And this is kind of how it works.
Some people say that'd be a pretty good choice. Bring in the Hispanic president. Some people say that he's posturing.
Some people say, and excuse me, I'll get to you, Joe, in just a second, but some people say that you may be setting up Sharpton for a run against Hillary in 2006 in the Senate.
Journalistically, it's a very peculiar technique because the idea behind journalism is that you're sourcing who you're referring to. This is just sort of a clever way of inserting political opinion when you know it probably shouldn't be there.
Some people say that this might undermine what the U.S. troops are doing there.
Some people say John Kerry has some similarities to an earlier Massachusetts politician.
And some people say, in light of what's happened with the Oil for Food program, some people say supported by Iran.
Some say, I've heard a couple people say...
Some say that...
I can't do it anymore. I've seen it too much. I found this word. I'd never seen this word before. You know how much fun German people are, right? I found this German word, and I'm not going to say it right, but it's basically Weltschmerz. And there's no English translation for this word. But basically, it describes this just depression you feel when the world doesn't live up to your expectations. And I think we all suffer from Weltschmerz a little bit because things like this have just become standard operating procedure, that we just externalize all of our waste like this. And so everybody's a little down and depressed. And just as a result, I just think of us as just the worst mammals ever. That's really what I think of it, just by design. Because everything that we've ever owned is still here. So, like, remember in the 90s when you're into Nirvana and Pearl Jam, you bought that flannel shirt? That shirt's still here. I mean, I don't know, it's probably in New Jersey. I don't know where it is, but it's here somewhere. We didn't send it into space. It's here. It's somewhere on the planet here. And remember when you were going to get into shape and you bought those rollerblades and you were going to do it and you lasted like 2 weeks and you gave up? The rollerblades are still here. They're here somewhere. I don't know where. But, tonight you're going to go out for dinner, you're going to order sushi, and you're like, what's this? Oh, little bits of rollerblades. That's basically what's happening. Because everything is still here. So we're just terrible, terrible creatures. Just awful. And it doesn't help that we brag about our dominion over nature. Because, we're sore winners. That's what we are. We're just really sore winners. And it's just, first of all, we get tired easily. We cry at the drop of a hat. We're easily trippable, easily. You never see a zebra trip, do you? It never happens. And we just die in just the dumbest ways possible. We're just terrible.